So yesterday we started adding our details. We blocked in a lot of color with our graphite chunk. In our background, there's a lot of texture in the background. You see a lot of the texture on the paper, the tooth of the paper. We started adding some details to our skull. There's a lot of value changes, a lot of subtle value changes in the skull. Void of line. We're delineating all these changes in topography. These feels like this skull is coming off the page, coming off the paper, giving us that three-dimensional feel as opposed to hard outlines. Hard outlines create two-dimensionality stickers. We don't want stickers. We want three-dimensional drawings, and that's done by utilizing your tools. Use your rag, use your erasers, use your blending stumps. Repeat the process. Okay, the more repetitive you are, the more value changes in value, small changes in value you're going to get. If you are just leaving this as is, doesn't look great. I'm just going to leave it as is. Come back, take your blending stump, be a little sporadic with it. Do like we did with the lemon. Stipple in your shadows, stipple in your highlights. Take your eraser, make your rocks. You can make a worm out of it too. That's another way that we'll create texture this year, is making our worm and just rolling it around. Go around your contours, go through your highlights, go through your lowlights. These subtle changes, once they're added up and added up and added up, become a very, very big deal. Okay, it starts to make sense. It starts to work out, starts to look good. Then we'll come back with our 2B and our 2H pencils if we need to outline anything. We're still using the edge of the pencil. We're trying not to make a hard line. 2H pencil, if I need a hard line, works really well because it will not show up against the 6B and the 2B that we've blended out a couple times. Okay, 2H, hard graphite, extremely great. If I outline my skull here, even tripod grip, it does not show up like a heavy outline. We don't want to have a heavy ebony pencil, 6B pencil, even a 2B pencil shows up a lot more than our 2H. Okay. We started doing the surface texture of our crown, making it look metallic. Really, really abrupt changes in shadow and highlight. Very, very vivid highlight, erase down to white. Dark shadows, 2B and 6B pencils, blend those out, just like we did the what was it? The glare in the apple. Same thing, same exact thing. Making all these little rivets. Instead of drawing each and every one of them, we made the letter C backwards and erased out a dot. Okay, that's all in the video. I want to work on the candlestick today. This is all just repetitive from what we did here and here. It's a little bit less repetitive over here, and we have actually indents instead of things that come out. So instead of making a backward C here, we'll make a forward C and then a dot on the other side. That'll make it look like it's receding as opposed to coming out at us. All right. Candlestick. I'm going to start with my 6B pencil, sharpen it up. And it's pretty dark. It blends in a lot with our background in our reference, but there's a lot of darkness in it that we can pull out really quickly. Highlights coming from the left, we know that from everything that we see here. And this is all kind of just weathered geometrical shapes. I'm gonna start it simply just looking at my reference. I got a lot of dark over here. This is going to frame my skull. When you're coloring in, just like we did with the apple lemon cube, try and go with the contour of your object first. So all these lines are going one way, so it doesn't look scratchy. This goes into my skull a little bit more. This will frame my skull. And I got a little bit of a highlight there. Dark. Down on the ball or the bell. Feel free to turn your paper. A lot of artists like to be contortionist. I'm not one of those. I'm going with the same direction. And then along these horizon lines here that we drew, I'm just going to flick out from my shadows. That's going to give you a good taper from really dark over here to lighter. I've got a dark spot underneath this donut looking shape. Same thing here. Dark on this side. So these are all just little cylinders, little bells. A little bit of information on shadows over here. So I'm just going to make that C. And this is kind of like glass too. Focus on what you see, not what you think you know. You see a little bit of a shadow over here, a little bit of a shadow here coming in. So my highlight's not just on my left line, it's just right of that. We'll blend this all out first and then pull out our highlights after. There's a lot of marks here, lines going up and down. My suggestion is just think about it as a solid cylinder right now. So a solid cylinder is dark on my shadow side, just like I did down on the bell. Then I'll have a highlight. And then just to solidify it, I'll have a little bit of shadow on this side. Any hard line that you make, try and soften it out into it. Think gradient scales, really thin changes in value quickly. This is a heavier line, this is a thinner line. You're gonna follow your reference going up. Like I got this weird shadow here. It's a good thing about working with observational drawings as opposed to trying to make this up on our own. I can tell you that a lot of these are formulaic and really geometric. There's some shadows in here, shadows in there. There's a dark shadow along this donut. Stuff that you probably wouldn't think about is in front of you. Make sure that you're following your facts, and then you build up your repertoire as you draw a lot. The reflections in the bell underneath this bell are ridiculous. This is pretty pale actually. I got a dark shadow here, and I'll give you guys a second to catch up before we actually do this top part of the candlestick. That's just like glass. It's so reflective. It really doesn't have a ton to do with what we did down here. This has a bunch of information in it. And you kind of need to pay attention to it a little closer. I'm going to zoom in really close, zoom in really close on your iPad so that you can really see these weird changes, weird shapes, amorphous shapes. In my bell, I have a little bit of shadow over here underneath the bell. And I've got this chunk of shadow here. Do I know what it is? No, I don't really care what it is either. I'm focused on drawing what I see. So this chunk of shadow, just like we did in our apple. Got this chunk of shadow. I got these, I guess, windows, maybe. Who cares? Got these highlights in there, and then a really dark shadow over here. I probably could use a 2B instead. In the end, I'm really just focusing on these shapes, amorphous shapes. Now, when I blend the whole thing, blending stump, start from your edge. As I get to my highlights, I'm not pressing down quite as hard, but I'm going through it. That'll give me a good transition. Get all the way up on top of your skull. I'm not pressing too hard. You can use your rag. Again, experiment with the tools that are at your disposal. Can't see what I'm doing. It just softens out those lines a lot, especially here. It's going to fade a bit into your background. That's perfectly fine. And highlights, pick whatever eraser you want. I'm going to use my Prismacolor eraser. Go along there to give it that metallic look. I've got a little bit of change in distance and then a little bit more. I've got some hard lines. For these hard lines, I'll just use the edge of the eraser, dig in a little bit, maybe change it a little bit of line density. If it looks too formulaic or too mechanical, blend it out. Create another layer. Pay attention to your reference. Don't try and do this from what you think you know. We might have drawn candlesticks before in our life, but we haven't drawn this one. Where I have my lines coming down here, you can freehand it, or you can get a straight edge. I like my brighter highlight there. There, drag that down a little bit. There's a little bit of inconsistencies in it that makes it look believable. You can add and subtract these lines. If you need to, come back with your 2B, something that'll maintain a sharp point and show up along that 6B. And like I said, you can have it go all the way down. You can leave it like that. It's an aged thing. I'm not going to give you too much crap for it. if any. No one else should either. I'm going to bring out some highlights on it too with my kneaded eraser. Just make a little nubbin and dust along your highlight side. That's going to give you another layer. It's going to make it show up a little bit more. Couple highlights up here. Go back and forth between your erasers, see what the difference is that you can make between your kneaded eraser and your Prismacolor, or your kneaded eraser and your art gum and kneaded eraser. If you need to tailor any of your erasers, make sharper edges, cut out a 45. Something like this works really well for little tiny lines. You can change the dynamic of your edge. This candle's snuffed. We've got enough darkness in the background if you guys want to light the candle. I think that's always a fun thing to do. Fire. It's fun. In context, I guess. Lit candle or non-lit candle? Non-lit? All right, I'm gonna snuff the candle then. Even though our reference shows that this is a solid white candle, my suggestion is to make it look cylindrical. So I erased out completely. I can take my blending stump or my rag, just really lightly, left side. I'm barely touching the paper, a little bit on the right side. Gives it some dimension. This also allows our eyes to see that this is metallic, and it is a little bit brighter than this wax candlestick. You can have some errant marks to make it look like there's actual wax dripping over. And then for my snuffed candle, make a worm out of your kneaded eraser. And you can do what you did with your texture in your skull. Press down a little harder. Just spin it. Press down a little harder. Lighten up pressure. Just spin. And then you would come back and embellish some of those lines. I have a sharp edge. If you need an X-Acto knife to make a sharp edge, that's fine. You can come up here and cut out a 45. I'm gonna light my candle. Blend it out if you want to light your candle. And I'm gonna take my Prismacolor just above my horizon line here, just above, make a teardrop if you want to. And to make it glow, just like we did on our apple, flat kneaded eraser. Don't press down hard. Work in a circle as you get further away. Don't press down quite as hard. I'll also make it look like it's emanating heat or emanating light, radiating. Every time you lift up your eraser, go back to the source. Just like with your core shadows, blending those out into your highlights. Just fun to do. You don't have to do it. And I would tend to make this a little bit brighter by going darker around it. So I took my graphite chunk, framed it a little bit more, working around that aura, working around that highlight, especially. I get further away from it, I'm not pressing down quite as hard. And then when I blend it, what I have down here will blend nicely into what I have in the background. But what I have up here, if I just, not as much pressure. Stays a bit darker. Keep softening that down as far as you can take it. Go through what you've already done over here. You'll be able to subtract it back out. If you wanted to light your candle, that is. You wanted to keep it simple. Just have the smoke. That's fine too. You're the artist. If I needed to have any other information in that highlight, 2H pencil. I have any line work that I want to add. I can bring out the edge of that flame. I can bring out a little bit of the wick. Bring out the edge of my candle. And you could still do your smoke if you wanted to. All right, so that makes that glowing. It looks a lot different on the video than it does in real life. Video is doing a lot of high contrast for me. I don't really know if I can change that. All right, let's get this wood planking in here and then we'll call it a week. This is a really beat up wooden plank in comparison to the wooden cube that we did on the apple lemon cube drawing. It looks like there's actually 2 planks. It's not like a cut here. There's a plank that goes across, it looks like. And I'm just gonna focus on what I see with my value. If I have any really hard lines right now, I'm eliminating them. Any really hard lines, do your best to eliminate them, whether it's your tough stick eraser, your Prismacolor, any eraser. Try them all. Art gum works really well, so I'll probably use that one. Bless you. I'm going to go a little bit darker on this side. I'm just going to take my chunk. I want a really light pass. Blend it out. As long as I can still see underneath, I'm good to go. If I need to go a little bit darker underneath, just take your chunk, make your line one more time, fade down towards the bottom. Doesn't have to be a solid line. Soften, 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 soften. And I've got a lot of shadows back here. A lot of shadows on my side here. Up my edge on this side. And there. If I've lost that line, I'll probably come back with the 2B and outline in a minute. Right, and there's a couple ways you can do this. You can make it look like the wood grain that we did on the cube, or you can really beat it up, similar to what I did with the skull here. I can take a sheet of paper, tear it, and in this side, just make some, instead of straight lines, I'm gonna make some really jagged lines real quick. The idea is to work quick and in a bunch of layers. It's going to be subtle. If you use a harder eraser, it'll be a little less subtle. So mix your erasers. Have this weird edge. You can freehand this too. You can make your worm. You can go really quick with the edge of your Prismacolor eraser. Just dance along on your edges where you blend it out, or when you went outside of your edge. Soften it back. You have a hard edge here, break it up. These lines change direction. So formulaic lines, not the same exact line. And do a couple layers. The more layers you do with that, the better it would look. You can also do that with the 2B pencil. I've got this knot here. Bless you. Or is that you just tearing your paper? Random lines. The 2B is not going to show up too much. I'm spinning it, rocking it back and forth on top of those, making a ton of passes. Break it up even more if you want. Like I said before, 2B, 2H pencil on my edge. Change how hard you're pressing down as you're making your runs. That's going to give you a bunch of different lines. Okay. Same thing here. On this side, different changes in direction a bit. Got soft edge there. Maybe a change in plane. Maybe I'll be a little bit heavier handed right there. Be sporadic with it. And then on the top plane, 2H pencil because it's super duper gray. Same passes, pick some of these spots. Draw with your entire arm. Hand-eye coordination goes a long way here. My hard line, fading up. If I go into my skull a little bit, it should be easy enough to subtract out. And I'll ground my skull on top of this plank. Got a dark shadow here for that change in plane. Changes in planks. Might as well draw it. So this texture becomes one of those things that you've gotten your patron to come up to your drawing from 30 feet away, 15 feet away. Small drawings. I can tell that there's something in front. I can kind of tell that it's a skull or whatever. There's good changes in contrast. I'm walking up to it. Whether or not people like it remains to be seen. Diminishing returns as you get closer. We've talked about that. Getting people to walk up to your drawing from several feet away, though, to check in the win column. That's you telling yourself you've got good contrast, you've got an interesting subject matter that people can see. Even if they can't see what the subject matter is, the contrast will quite often bring them in. I'm gonna ground my skull on the plane one more time. So anywhere that skull is touching the plank, I'm gonna outline a little heavier and flick out towards my right side, flick out. That's with a 2B pencil. If you go darker, you can go darker. I'm gonna do the same thing with the 2B on my candlestick. It's touching the floor here, even though you don't really see much of a shadow. I'm gonna cast a little bit of one. You want to make any hard outlines on the edge of your plank. Keep in mind that it's an old wooden plank. Don't have a perfectly mitered line. Beat it up. Any outlines, just try to fade it up into your background a little bit more. All right. I'm gonna come back over here, embellish some lines that might have got blended out. This is my 2B pencil. This will not blend out quite as much as the 6B did. By this time, I'm relatively married to my lines, and I can make some decisions pretty aggressively. Inside of those shadows that I made with the 6B, this becomes my core shadow now. And you can also use your ebony pencil if you need to. A lot of times my 2B will satisfy my thirst for solid black lines, but if you need to, ebony pencil. Getting towards the end of my drawing, go back to your core shadows, add some of these core shadows with your ebony or your heavy-handed 2B. See if you can do it without needing to blend out. Keep it sporadic. You don't need to add too much. Just enough for our eyes to keep moving around the drawing. Sit back from your drawing, God forbid. Re-engage. See if there's any spots in your drawings where I've zoomed out a lot. I've looked at it from 10 feet away, more than an arm length. Tons of shadows, changes in value really quick. We're about done. We'll finish this up for next week. Have a great weekend, guys. Nice break.